Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining and listening to this webinar today. My name is Osly J. Flores. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and today we'll be doing a webinar around CLNA. And today I have with me joining and supporting me in this webinar my colleague.
Hi everyone, I am Yasamin Khoshpour. I'm a research assistant here at OCCRL. Looking forward to our module today.
Okay, and so the title of our webinar today is Centering Equity in CLNA Process, Culturally Relevant Pedagogy and Support. This webinar was held on Wednesday, November 13th. So one of the things that first to begin with to set up as a setup for this webinar is this idea of equity consciousness, right? So, and having an understanding of an equity consciousness requires basically educators and leaders to encourages them to critique the power structures and encourages individuals to be aware of the challenges to oppressions and the status quo, right? So one of the things, for example, having an equity consciousness, you would have an understanding of equity issues. You also reject deficit thinking, deficit ideologies, and you also be authentic and consistent around your messaging for equity. And you provide an understanding of self-awareness, critically self-reflection. And that's one of the piece that we'll be looking at. This idea of critical self-reflection is one piece that we'll be looking at in particular. So again, like how this equity conscious looks like is we think about it in this process as beginning with self-reflection, right? And then becoming aware of equity issues taking place in your institution, and then also going about implementing change in practice, right? And actually going to praxis and implementing action towards challenging those inequities that are existing in your institution, and that requires changing in attitudes, right? So this process of equity consciousness is what kind of we've been thinking about in relation to culturally responsive in your CNLA review. So again, continuing the conversation with this critical self-reflection, one thing we would like for you to do to present in this webinar is this activity around social identity. Social identity is examining all those identities, those socially constructed identities that we have that are very important for us, right? We all have various identities that are important and shape who we are. And today, in this activity, we're going to have you investigate and critically self-reflect on those identities and how that shapes you. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. So as Dr. Flores mentioned, as we explore culturally responsiveness, one critical component is understanding how our own identities and positionality shape the way we engage with our colleagues, with the students, and with the communities around us. To create a truly equitable learning environment, we must reflect on our own positionality, the unique combination of our social identities and the perspectives that we bring into our work. And we're going to talk about one powerful tool for this reflection, the social identity map, which helps us examine the intersections of our identities such as race, gender, socioeconomic status, and ability, and understand how these facets can influence our worldview and decision-making as faculty and administrators. So what is the social identity map? As scholars Jacobson and Mustafa in their article 2019 mention, the social identity map is a reflexivity tool developed to help individuals identify, reflect on, and critically analyze their social identities in the context of research and practice. Jacobson and Mustafa describe it as a flexible starting point to guide researchers to reflect and be reflexive about their social location. It encourages users to explore the intersections of their identities, again, such as race, gender, class, ability, and understand the correlation between their perspectives and their interactions based on those identities, those social personal identities. So now, as in our slide, there are three tiers to this social identity map. It consists of three tiers that have each been designed to help us do this critical reflection process. The first tier is identify these social identities. What are they? Reflect on facets like our class, gender, race. The tier two is understanding the impacts of those facets on our perceptions, on our values, on the interactions we have. And the third tier is exploring the emotions, it's exploring the depth, delving into the specific experiences and the dynamics tied to those experiences related to our identities, their reflection, their impact on our life.
And so one of the things is we've adapted this social identity map by Jacob and Mustafa and tried to provide it in a context for you to take and use this tool yourself and to reflect on this. So before we ask you to take time to do this activity, I would like to share my own experience in completing this social identity map activity. So for example, as you can see, uh, one of the things, a category that I completed was race, right? So for me, identify as Latino, right? And then when I look at the second tier, how this identity is influencing me, it's an important part of my identity, and it's also an identity that minoritizes me, right? And then when I look at a third tier, and when I examine that identity even further and with the emotions that come with it, if, for example, the idea of identity, you can see it's very important because it creates for me an understanding of my culture. It brings with me language, music, food. Those connections are the emotions that I get when I think about having the Latino as a race. But then it also provides, I share like self-worth, right? Having this identity it provides me self-worth for me. But at the same time, right, it minoritizes me. Sometimes in certain spaces, I have to be cautious, right? And also in certain settings and spaces, I'm also marginalized, right? So as you can see, in certain identities, there's both positives and some challenges that come along with those identities, right? So, and then in another example, in age or generation, I say I'm in my early 40s, so I'm telling of my generation. As you can imagine, in the second level, being in my early 40s, I was very influenced by the 1990s, right? That was an important decade for me. And also, I was right the experience of the growth of the tech boom, right? And so because of that, because of my age, some of the emotions and that come with that age is like I grew up in hip hop, right? Looking at Biggie, Tupac, right? Those were influentials when I was growing up. Also, I experienced because of the 90s, Bill Clinton's presidency and kind of being aware of that president, and like with the tech boom, I remember the time when Amazon was just about selling books, right? Now you can get everything, right? And then the learning about Google and how to use Google. So those kind of like, as you can see, that identity influences me. And another example is that I'll go talk through is gender. Like, I identify as male, and with that, and looking at the second tier, I recognize that it both gives me privileges and also oppression, right? I experienced some oppression because of that. So, for example, I recognize that as a male, it provides me access to jobs. It also comes with it some issues of power, influences of power. But at the same time, also thinking about intersecting identities, when I look at my male and race, that brings it, I'm perceived as dangerous, right? So that oppression sometimes looks at it, and sometimes I might be perceived as dangerous, right? Somebody might cross the street when they see me, right? And so also when I think about being a Latino male, is that we see those tropes, those dangerous tropes of like failures in education. Latino men do not seek education. They don't value education, right? So as you can see, all these identities kind of influence, kind of shape who I am and how I work, right? And so, but one thing, one last one that I would like to share before I give a pause for you all to think about and take a process, take a time to do this activity yourselves, is this professional role. In my professional role, racial equity is very important for me, and it's part something that I engage with in my research, my teaching, and my practice, right? And so, for example, in that, again, it highlights the work. It's very important for me. It's what I do. Also, be like this professional role of racial equity, it provides fulfillment. So in the work part is I seek praxis. It informs. I'm about action. My hope is to committed that the things that I do, the research, the teaching, all commit to this idea of hope and shaping and influencing for change, right? And it's also the research I do. I focus a lot on racial equity in my work, and so as you can see, that identity, recognizing that identity influences kind of how it levels up into the emotion, and also it provides fulfillment for myself, right? Doing this work, it does provide me a fulfillment. It makes me content, and more importantly, in my tombstone, my hope is that whatever I'm doing in between the dashes, I'm able to around racial equity is something that hopefully I'm proud of. And so, as you can see, this is an example of how I completed a social identity map and really interrogated and critically self-reflected on how those identities are important for me, but also how the emotions that come with it and how they shape me. So what we would like now to do is for you to take a pause on the video, on the recording, and take time for yourself to try to take about 20 minutes to complete this social identity map. If you don't have it, what we have the PDF is on file. It's accessible, will be accessible. But if not, write this down on a piece of paper and kind of sketch it out yourself and take about 20 minutes to complete this social identity map. And as you can see, we left one block open for you to put an identity that's important for yourself that you would like, that's not here, that you would like to complete, that's important to you. So for now, we ask you to take a pause the video, the recording, and take about 20 minutes to complete the social identity map. Okay?
Okay. I hope you got a chance to take a look at the social identity map and come up with one for yourself. Think about the three tiers of the identities and their impact and how we feel about them. Now, I would like to invite you to take a few moments and think about these questions here. Consider two identities in addition to your professional role identity. Um, Take a look at these questions and, for example, how do these facets of your identity impact the way you approach, interact with, and interpret your work? Consider how do you think student social identities influence their experiences in the classroom? How do your social identities influence how you complete the CLNA reporting? Or the questions you have to think about based on your social identities. Ponder and try to reflect on these for yourself or talk about them with your colleagues. We invite you to have some reflection time over this area of our social identity.
Thank you, Yasamin. And so now, in continuing that conversation, again, yes, continue to ponder those questions for yourselves. And so, in continuing this webinar, we also want to engage again, being about culturally responsive. Another way for you to continue that conversation is have the researchers have done is the syllabus review, right? So some scholars have done a systematic review of syllabus, and they have conducted that. One way for you to be culturally responsive is the syllabus, right? And the syllabus is important, as you know, because the syllabus is a reflection of your teaching as well as the learning that's taking place in the classroom. So, in looking at a syllabus review, it has potential to reveal the assumptions, attitudes, values, and beliefs that shape the teaching, right? So, what we're going to share today is a kind of a few things that you can do and look at and steps that you can take to do a culturally responsive syllabus, right? So, who is your syllabus written for and how does it serve and who does it serve? And so there's four key groups, right, in the syllabus. And there's the institution, what's the institution telling you that you have to teach, what's your department, basically your programming, what they desire, what's to be instructed, the faculty, how do you see your instruction, your pedagogy, right, the vision of the classroom that you're having, and the students, those who get impacted and how their learning takes place, right? So in a syllabus, it communicates the structures of the classrooms, right? Like the rules, the policies, the relationships you expect with students, right? And so in addition, it also uh, tells the students what the academic field deems legitimate knowledge, right? And it also legitimizes students and it legitimizes the form of instruction. And so with that is what the messaging that takes place in the syllabus. There's been identified 6 equity-minded practices that you can do to make your syllabus more culturally responsive. And so those 6 components are demystifying the syllabus, creating a more welcoming culture, right? Validating students, creating a partnership in the classroom and representation, like whose voices, whose readings are you including in the syllabus, and deconstructing, mystifying the syllabus as kind of like this power structure. So with that, let's take a quick review, an example of a syllabus review. So if you could take a look at this syllabus, this example, the messaging of this syllabus, looking at it, does this, if we look at it from the lens of welcoming, one of the questions, just simply looking at what you see so far, does this address your value relative to inclusion, equity, diversity, and belonging? So if you take a look at this course syllabus, is it creating a welcoming messaging for students? Take a quick glance and then think for yourself, does this address the value of relative to inclusion, equity, and diversity? Okay. So what would it look like, right? What would be an example of that? So here is an example what an equity-minded statement would look like that would create a more welcoming environment. So for example, maybe you can create a statement that says, my classroom is a safe and inclusive place for all. Every individual is valued, has the capability to succeed, and has something to offer the class. Know that I'm always here for you and that my door is always open. So as you can see here, having this statement would create a more welcoming environment for students. And so sometimes we say, well, do we need these statements? Do students really read the syllabus? Sometimes. So, I just wanted to share an example where, students are paying attention to what we have in the syllabus. They are reading the syllabus. So as you can see in this tweet by Professor Roderick Carey, he tweeted, I've never had a student who bigged up any of the sentences in my course until now. I'm overjoyed and honored those words inspired you. So a student in his class says, things I've never seen in the syllabus until today, a professor explicitly committing to interrupt any and all instances of verbalized or type racist, sexist, xenophobic, ableist comments, to name a few, that may cause harm to students in the course. So you can see here, this professor included messages that create a welcoming space. And it was recognized by students. Okay, so continuing, looking at the element of demystifying. So look at the course description of an example found in the syllabus and course goals, and take a look. And if we were to take a look at it with the lens of demystifying, some of the questions that we could ask ourselves is, does this offer a teaching philosophy? Particularly how it addresses issues of equity-minded approaches and overall engagement in the class. Does this center student experience? Do the learning goals speak to students' own cultural identities, backgrounds, and lived experience? So this is an example in a way that when you look at a syllabus and you want to demystify it, these are some of the questions you can ask in reviewing your own syllabuses, right? And taking a look at these and answering these questions, and then challenging yourself to do how can you answer these questions in your syllabus. So, and then a component of validating, taking a look at the instruction method and student outcomes. Some of the questions that can help you think about around issues of validating is, do the lectures cover identities and bear equity-minded approaches? Are due dates are due dates inclusive of holidays? Are we recognizing maybe this assignment, this paper, making it on this due date falls on a holiday, and how that impacts students' ability to uh, do well on the assignment? Are materials included, written, and created by people from different perspectives, right? And thinking about what the literature, again, who are the authors you're using? And then, again, this is something that you have to think about. I know your certain content, especially programmings, right, might be more difficult, but they're still doable, right? It's still something that you can do make sure that you create more diverse and representation in your materials. And this component of welcoming, looking at course policies, support services, looking at these statements that we have to fill out in the syllabus, and some questions that can help you think about how to create more welcoming is, does it does my syllabus provide an inviting language, right? Is it inviting for students? Does it offer meeting in groups? Does it, besides meeting like individually, does it provide opportunities to be more relational and community based in the learning opportunities in the classroom, right? That's another way of looking at welcoming component. So again, when you're thinking about equity-minded curriculum, think about, does it intentionally, does your syllabus intentionally develop to be equitable in both the design and facilitating equitable learning outcomes? Is it culturally responsive? Is it diverse? Are diverse voices being included? Is it inclusive? All right. Am I thinking about students with learning disabilities? Is that how is it impacting English learners? Right? Is it race conscious? Thinking about, am I centering the voices, diverse voices? Right. So
Now, based on the ideas of the practices of equity-minded, which of these practices is found in most syllabi when writing your institution's CLNA report? And which of them do you think are generally absent? Another question. Which of these 6 equity-minded practices would you consider to embed in your next CLNA report? How would you think this can help you and your colleagues be more culturally responsive with both the reporting or the syllabi of your courses. Take a few moments, about 5 to 10 minutes, to think about these questions or talk about them with your colleagues, and we will be back with the rest of our module.
So welcome back. And so now after, taking time to look at the culturally responsive, the six equity-minded practices, we leave you with some reflective practices for you to consider, right? And again, the webinar is about culturally responsiveness and your CNLA. So some of these reflective practices that we leave you with is partner with colleagues in identifying culturally relevant materials and pedagogical approaches in your classes. You all might be at different stages, and so it might be useful to coming to community and sharing ideas, and peer network around that. Ask students for feedback on your syllabus and incorporate those for future considerations and other course offerings. Identify supports within your institution to increase culturally responsive. There's some individuals or some ideas that are out there, some people working on these things that can help you support in your content, or maybe in other institutions, and feel free to reach out to them. Continue to think and develop your equity statements and equity plans, right? See as equity statements as a continual process to continue to grow and develop and develop them. Teaching and learning, attend teaching and learning professional development opportunities. Continue to seek out growth in these practices. And so with that, we do want to leave you with a few resources. Take a look. Again, you can pause the webinar, but these are maybe some helpful materials and resources that you can use, again, to continue to develop more culturally responsive responses in your CNLA. And with that, we do want to leave you with the contact information of our colleagues who are helping you and supporting you in this CNLA process, and providing you webinars. With that, so again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Osly J. Flores. Please feel free to reach out.